not.
Not by name. Not by name.
Not by name. We won't
Yeah.
mention any names. No, but again, I'm Megan Seaton. I head up the business development piece for Vero, and with me, I have our founder and CEO, Mr. Abhijit Varakar. He does go by AV. So, hey, AV, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
Good,
We
good.
match. We're in blue.
We do. I put up the pink yesterday. So,
You were so red.
AV was making fun of me yesterday.
I
We had a big
wasn't making
meeting,
fun.
big presentation, and I had my hearts on, my red blazer. I was all for the holiday. So, if you are joining us today, please put a chat in the comments section and let us know where you're joining from. Say hey to us and help us out with this live. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear them. All right. Well, AV, do you have anything you want to say before we get started?
No, I'm excited to talk about this topic and see what kind of questions you have.
Yes, absolutely. I am too. So let's just jump on into it, I guess. I know we've kind of talked about um, what our government entities should do before they go out to market to select an ERP. We've talked a little bit about the RFP. And today I just want to focus on the latter end, so the implementation. So can you speak a little bit about implementations and maybe what that means for our viewers?
Yeah, gosh, there's so much to talk about. Implementation, essentially, in a very narrow sense, is putting in, installing the system that you just bought. But within that, it involves so many different nuances, like project management, change management, making sure that your processes are right and the system's being configured right to your processes. All of those good stuff that it takes years to get this right. So implementation can't just be installing the system on your server or in the cloud and calling
Mhm.
it a go live. It really involves a lot of important moving parts that when they come together and you are live on a new system and you're using this to produce better data or have better processes, that's what I would consider a successful implementation.
Sure, sure. What are some things one should consider um, to make sure that the implementation is successful? Maybe what strategies should be used to make sure the process runs as smoothly as it can?
I think the first thing is that take it slow, and these aren't like technical strategies. These are things that we help our clients with. Take it slow, think it through. These are once in a lifetime, once in a career type projects and opportunities, and they're bears, like we talked about in the last one,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
They are large projects that impact your organization financially. It can impact your position. It can impact your overall trajectory of your career. So taking it slow and really thinking through why you're doing this, how to go about it. And
Hmm.
again, it's like building a brand new building. You can't just go get some cement and
Right.
bricks and then start building a building, right? You have to go through it in a methodical manner. The other thing is have the right people in place, and we talk about this a lot in our
Hmm.
YouTube channel, right? So how do you say that? Like and subscribe? Yeah, like and
Yeah.
subscribe. Um, so basically, project management is a key component. You have to make sure that you have the right people in place. You have the functional experts that do nothing for the most part than other than helping configure your new product.
Hmm.
They all have day jobs. They're purchasing agents, they're accounting clerks, they're accounts payables managers, and what you're asking them to do is for a whole year or more do their day jobs and at the same time do uh, project work. So it helps to have augmented staff doing some of this things. It helps to
Hmm.
have a project manager. It helps to have a functional lead for each area that you're implementing, and someone to keep an eye on the vendor. Really,
Right.
it really is. Sometimes it's like managing a bunch of toddlers or herding cats, right?
It
Are
is.
the
Yes.
people, yeah, are people in the right room at the right time Are people doing their homework? Because that's the other thing. You'll have a day full of configuration sessions, and then you'll have to go back and do your homework. And homework could mean anything from research to formatting a spreadsheet to drawing process maps to understanding the new system and doing training on your own. There's a lot of things that go on in an implementation that can go wrong, frankly. So you have to have the right pieces in place as you take on a large project like this.
Yes, absolutely. And speaking of those pieces of the project, um, who is the one that should be coming up with the project plan as it relates to implementation? What phases should be considered, in your opinion, when we're
So
talking about implementation?
yeah, great question. I think the project manager on the client side should be doing the
Hmm.
more of the driving, because the ERP vendor will come in and say, "Here's our project plan. This is how you implement our system." And more often than not, they don't pay attention to what's going on at the client side. You might have
Right.
audits, you might have an election cycle, you might have new employees, a new director, a new mayor, a new council. So there's a lot of moving
Hmm.
parts that the vendor really needs to dig into and see how it impacts their schedule. So when they come in, they'll say, "Here's our 6 month timeline. You're going live in August." And the
Okay.
clients looking at each other saying, "How did you come up with that? And what about my summer vacation? And what about when the audit happens? Or what about when the budget season kicks in?" And these are different processes and different timelines for different clients. So our software vendor friends, please pay attention to what's going on the client side, and don't just be selfish and say, "Here's my project plan." So the client's project manager, which can be a third party or somebody internal that only does project management on this project for the next 2 years,
Hmm.
someone like that needs to drive the project planning uh, methods and processes, and keep the vendor accountable. So when the vendor sends you their project plan, you have to sit down with them and say, Here's our version of your plan, and let's come up with something that works for all parties."
Right. Yes. And speaking of those kind of internal project managers, I know some of our clients have oftentimes formed committees,
Hmm.
right? ERP implementation committees or
Right.
selection committees. Can you speak to that a little bit and why that's been beneficial?
So those tend to be more decision-making committees, because
Hmm.
you cannot manage ERP projects by committee. You can
Right.
have a committee as a reporting mechanism, right?
Hmm.
In a large county, like we have a large county government in upstate New York that we work with, they have an implementation committee. And the way that functions is when, for example, a set of proposals came in for ERP software, the committee then can go through all of them, tabulate the results. They can give points. They can judge your on-site demos, and then that becomes your recommendation. Whoever comes out of that becomes sort of the recommendation to the mayor's office or city manager's office, saying, "Here's the software vendor we recommend, and here's why."
Yeah,
So com-
absolutely.
committees are decision making bodies. Also on the policy side, um,
Mhm.
you can have a process that's been run the same way for 30 plus years, and now because of the new systems, you're going to have to change some policies, not just processes. And that
Yep.
happens at a high level, in an executive level at the client side. So there is a place for committees. It's not in the day-to-day project management.
Right. Okay. All right. And oftentimes those committees or the leadership that sits on those committees are the cheerleaders for the whole project, which I
Hmm.
also think is important. I can't talk today for some reason. It must be the Valentine's
Too much
hangover.
candy.
But so speaking of employees and employee morale, how might employee morale be affected by a large scale implementation?
So it's mostly detrimental unless you manage it well, right?
Right. Right.
when when consultants come in before the software is even being implemented, it's like Office Space. We're the bobs, right? They look at it and,
Yeah.
and immediately think, how's this going to change my life? What is it going to mean for my job? And so our job is to put people at ease and teach them how this is a transformational project for the organization, but also for their position. And it depends on who they are. If they're about to retire and they're thinking, "Why are you doing this now? Could you not have waited till I retired?" To them, the approach should be, and we successfully tried this before. It's what a good way to leave the position that you love so much, the organization you love so much. It's about your legacy. If it's
Hmm.
a new employee, then it's about their legacy too. How can you make an impact right away in the long term in this
Right.
organization you just walked into? So there are different ways of handling change and resistance
Hmm.
to change. There are formal ways, and then there are the sort of soft touch, human to human, day to day, compassionate way of treating people. And I think we are good at both ends. If I may plug my team here a little bit, that we come in a very non-threatening way and show the big picture to all levels. And what we also promote is that the project should have support from the top level
Hmm.
downwards and at the very bottom levels also, because this is, a large scale ERP implementation may be a political win for the mayor's office, but
Right.
ultimately it's what these people on the line have to live with for the next 20 years. So we should not be taking resistance to change lightly, because it's the people that are most resistant. There's a reason for it. They're going to be impacted the most on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, they should feel empowered, right? Because some of these automated processes may give them time to use their talents in a different way, right? To be more creative, to input their ideas, right?
Right.
So I feel like our team does a good job on honing in on that piece as well. So
Yeah,
we do,
and if
yeah,
I may add something to that, Megan,
yeah.
that's the strategic gold, right? You
Hmm.
have people, extremely smart people, that have done nothing but copy and paste Excel sheets all day
Right.
into, from this sheet to the other sheet, because the system that they have doesn't read it. And the most successful ERP implementations have been where the management has then been able to take these very smart people and put them in management roles. They've been able to
Mhm.
put them in strategic roles that are now they're using their brains to think about what's coming down uh, in their operations in the next 2 years, rather than you know copying and pasting spreadsheets.
Yes. So we do have a question from the chat. Let's see. How do automated systems fit in with traditional manual processes?
So really good question. I think
Mhm.
I think you need to find the balance, right?
Yep.
The fallacy and the theory is that all manual processes need to be converted to automated processes.
Right.
It's not always practical, because of the industry we work in. Sometimes you have to have some paperwork. The state dictates you need to have paper. The
Yep.
county's um, retention schedules might dictate that you still have paper. But overall, you have to think of it from an efficiency perspective. How
Right.
much can we automate practically without displacing people too much, or running afoul of the law when it talks about retention schedules? So the first thing to do really is business process analysis. You
Yep.
study what you're doing today, visualize where you want to go in the future, and that will give you the gaps in where you are. And from those gaps, you can then say, okay, here's our retention policy for permits, for building permits. How long do we have to keep those? If you're a
Hmm.
housing authority, you're keeping personally identifiable information in a very specific manner that should be really secure, and there's a different process for that. So once you do process analysis and really dig deep into where you're creating certain sets of records, and how you're handing off information, that will give you a good baseline for how you should be making those decisions on which processes to fully automate, which can be fully automated, and which ones still need uh, manual interventions.
Right. Right. And then I guess a two-part question. What issues can arise if those things aren't done correctly on the front end, and maybe if customization isn't done correctly during the implementation?
Oh, you said a bad word. There's no customization. It's 2023. The only customizations you should be doing are on custom reports, maybe some custom dashboards, but I think you're looking for the word configuration, right? You
Yeah.
you have your processes, your requirements. You've thought about how this system should work for you and how it should make your life better once it's live, and now it's time to put it into action. So when you go into these configuration sessions with the vendors, implementation consultants, business analysts, what have you, It's your job to make sure you're conveying your ideas and your processes in a way that these people that only know their software, and sometimes they're good enough to know the actual industry and your business processes, but it becomes the client's job to tell the configuration experts how to configure the system. Because if you don't pay attention, you're gonna be signing off on something that doesn't work for you, and then you're on the hook for making it perform over the next 10 to 20 years. So
Right.
it's really important that you think through how you want things to function. Once again, it's like building a house or buying a car. You need to have your criteria before you go out shopping.
Exactly. How much of a role does testing play after, well, before and after maybe an ERP system is fully implemented?
So testing is critical, but
Hmm.
traditionally you would test at the very end and say, "Here's what we built for you. Test it. Tell me if it works." Now you can test at several levels. Like, does the thing come on when I click on the icon? That's one level of testing, and that's
Hmm.
very basic. But what you really need to uh, take time to do is the technical and functional testing. What that means is, on a technical level, does the system uh, stay up? Does it crash?
Hmm.
Does it back things properly? Is it secure? All of that good stuff needs to be tested according to predetermined testing parameters. On the functional side, you have what's called test scripts that are derived from the requirements and the business process maps.
Right.
And what you're doing at that point is you're running the system through these test scripts that are very specific to your operations. And they're like 10 or 15 lines deep, and you're saying, can the system do the accounts payable process in these 5 or 10 steps as we've dictated them? And if it can, then what you're doing is you're accepting the system. You're saying that the
Hmm.
system passed 12 of these 15 parameters. We're going to accept it. We're going to sign off on it. We consider this live. So it's also important to define what an acceptance criteria is. It's really important to define what going live means to you and your
Yep.
organization, because that your definition is more important than what the software vendor thinks going
Hmm.
live means. So testing is critical. I think it's the last most important thing you do before you say we accept what you built for us or sold us, and you may start billing us now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So here's a good question. How can I ensure my data is protected when migrating to a new system?
So the first thing to do in your old system, if it's on premise, if you're doing backups on your own, is to make sure that those backups are working backups, like they're recoverable, that they can be restored in the event of a catastrophic event. The second thing is, when you're transferring data or converting data from an older system to a newer system, excuse me, you have to define how much data you want to take and why. You can't
Hmm.
you can't convert 30 years of transactional data into a new system. You could. It'll take you a long time and it'll cost you a lot of money.
Right.
So once you've determined that your data is secure in a sold system, you then do the conversion. But our recommendation is, if you're a city government, take 3 years of transactional data, 3 years of balances, 1 year of
Hmm.
transactional data, and then the rest can remain in your old system. You can have your IT department or some other vendor build you an archive of the old database that could have um, an interface that you can seek data from. So, how often do you really need 25-year-old data? It's extremely rare. So, think about the most efficient use of your money and time when you're talking about data conversion and moving data from the older system to the new system. And in the newer system, if it's a cloud-based software as a service hosted solution, then what you're buying is one of the things you're buying is backups. So once you have all of that set up, it's on the vendor to make sure that your data is not lost. And the good ones have multiple instances, they have multiple locations, so that you don't have to worry about one data center going down. But all in all, think about how you're going to use traditional historical data and how much you want to really bring forward to the new system.
Right. How can an organization best prepare for end user training once the system is implemented and training its users?
Yeah, so in the modern systems, they have on-demand, ongoing training.
Hmm.
There are systems like WalkMe that build into uh, newer ERP systems that basically it'll show you how to do a certain thing, right? You say I want to learn how to cut a purchase order,
Hmm.
and the system's training utility will actually run you through the process. Click here, next click here, next click here, and it'll teach you how to do that. So traditional training was go to a classroom and sit through lectures and then test based on what you just learned. But modern training mechanisms are multi-layered. You have your
Hmm.
self-paced learning using things like Tyler Munis as Tyler University, or some other products have WalkMe built into them that can show
Right.
you how to do it. And so you have self-paced learning, you have a lot of video learning, and then as you go through implementation, the configuration sessions tend to be learning opportunities and training opportunities. So if you're sitting through the process, if you're helping the consultants build your system, you're looking at how this works and you're testing it on the fly. And at the very end, as you go live, you have what we call war room scenarios where you just
Hmm.
bring everybody in from a certain process. You have training classrooms set up where you're just 2 days before go live, testing the system, doing some last moment training, and then, if all goes well, you're going live. But there are multiple ways to train your workforce, and self-paced learning to classroom, and all of those are in play these days.
Right. Nice. Okay. So how would one measure success of an implementation?
If it goes live per your specification. Like
Right.
we're seeing a lot of implementations that are going on. There's one client we're working with that we just started working with, and we inherited this. They've been they've been going through an ERP implementation for 5 years, and one of the reasons that it has taken so long is because this client did not have an internal PM.
Hmm.
They left it up to the vendor to come in and tell them how to do projects. So timelines weren't met, homework wasn't done. And a lot of it is the vendor's fault, but primarily it's because the client didn't have an internal PM. So now
We
that we're
love our
involved,
vendors, though. We love you guys.
we do, but sometimes they don't act in the best interest of
Right.
our clients. So
Right.
so anyway, how do you measure success? Is first define what success means to you. So before
Hmm.
you even go out into the market and buy a system, define what that means to you. And again, this I'm harping back on uh, the construction analogy, right?
Yep.
Do you have a design you like? Do you have the materials you like? Do you know what this should look like at the very end? And if you're looking for the White House and what was built is a hut, of course it's not success. So you have to define success early and then
Hmm.
hold the vendor community and your own people to those standards, so that at the very end, when the project ends, you can clearly define if it's successful or not. But at the very end, at the very minimum, success in any form means, are you live on the new system? Are you
Right.
paying for things you wanted? Are your
Hmm.
people more efficient? Are your financials more transparent? Do your citizens have better access to data and processing without having to come into the to city hall or courthouse to do
Right.
mundane stuff like obtain some forms?
Hmm.
There's a
Sure.
variety of success factors, and I think the most important thing is to define them early and then hold yourself and your team
Yes.
to the standards.
Define what that looks like for you
Right.
specifically.
Yep.
Yep. Absolutely. Do you have any examples of maybe a client that you worked with that had maybe some troubles going into implementation, right? I know we've talked a little bit about one client, but can you give us some more examples of maybe, um, a client that struggled with implementation and maybe we came in or somebody you knew came in to help them with that? What went well? What are they doing now? Is it successful? What were some of the struggles that
So
you've
the
seen?
the most successful clients have been where they've brought in our team from the beginning or someone else.
Hmm. Right.
The least successful ones are the ones that just go and buy a product because they like it. They
Mhm.
went to a conference, slick salesperson sells it to them, and next thing you know, you're signing on the dotted line.
Right.
But the successful ones are where they've really put time into thinking about the strategy, the
Mhm.
why we're taking this on, what's wrong with the old system. And 99% of the time, it's not the system, right? It's the processes. But the
Right.
system doesn't help itself because it hasn't been updated in the last 10 years. It's falling apart. The vendor's saying we're not supporting that system anymore. So there's a level of forced transition there. But at the
Mhm.
same time, the clients can absolutely push back and say, no, we're not sticking to your timeline. We'll move when we're ready to move. And
Sure.
it's a good time for them to really think through the business processes, the requirements, and pick the right solution going forward. So the clients that have done that right have been the most successful in my experience. And there are clients that are we have a newer client in Virginia that was with another consulting firm, and then they didn't like what they were producing, so they brought us in through another RFP. But the point is that they were successful. I think they'll be successful because they are not stuck with a decision they made 2 years ago, right?
Right.
They're willing to change, they're nimble.
Mhm.
So it's important for our clients and prospects to also know that there's multiple ways out of a bad situation,
Yep.
that you don't have to be stuck to a vendor. I mean, it's more difficult when you've picked a vendor that is a software vendor that's a publicly traded company and now you're under contract. It's difficult to get out of those deals, but we've helped our clients do that too, to our detriment. But being nimble with the sole focus of fulfilling your vision is the best way to go about this.
Yes, absolutely. And change is good. I had a mentor of mine tell me a long time ago, you don't want to become the blockbuster of the world, right? You want to ask questions and don't be content with, well, we're doing it this way because that's how it's always been done.
Hmm.
Because you're going to be left in the dust in the long run. And so, for my personal life, I feel like I've always tried to implement change. But even from this perspective, ERP projects, you've got to want to change to do better for yourself and for your citizens. So,
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, the recent analogy I made was I was in this building with a client that is a brand new building. It was all glass. It looked like the Apple headquarters, right? And they're
Right.
and they're running a green screen command based interface, and uh, the pitch was simple. Don't you want to live the life your building expects you to live? Like,
Right.
let's bring all of your standards up to what you really look like on the outside,
Hmm.
um, and hopefully they can do that.
Well, yes, and the world is just so ever changing, right? And changing fastly. Even for, my generation and people younger than me, everything is at their fingertips, so change is inevitable. But thank you for your time today. I think this has been a great conversation. I am good. We don't have any more questions in the chat, but would you like to add anything that maybe we didn't cover?
I don't think so. I think the important thing, again, I'm gonna cry myself hoarse saying this. Go plan properly, involve the experts, and
Mhm.
understand that you have a day job. All of you, may be the chief financial officer, finance director, CIO. This ERP stuff isn't something you should be taking on by yourself.
Right, absolutely. And if you guys have any questions, feel free
Okay.
to, we're happy to give you any advice. And make sure you follow us on all of our channels, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, we're everywhere. But thank you all. Have a great week.
Thank you, Megan. See ya.